Millionaire woman took a street musician to her ex's wedding. What he did shocked everyone. The October rain painted Manhattan streets in shimmering reflections, each droplet catching the neon glow of the city that never sleeps. Victoria Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, watching the world below move with purposeful urgency. At 32, she had everything society deemed valuable: a multi-million-dollar tech company, properties in 3 countries, and a name that commanded respect in boardrooms across America. Yet tonight, she felt hollowed out. The wedding invitation sat on her Italian marble countertop like an accusation. Cream-colored paper with gold embossing announced the union of Marcus Wellington III and Sophia Chun Martinez. Her ex-fiancé, the man who had shared her bed and dreams for 3 years, was marrying his secretary just 6 months after their brutal breakup. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had built her fortune creating dating apps that promised to find true love, only to discover that her own relationship had been built on lies and manipulation. Victoria's fingers traced the invitation's edges as memories flooded back. Marcus had been charming, sophisticated, everything her high society circles expected. He came from old money, spoke 5 languages, and knew exactly which fork to use at charity galas. But beneath the polished exterior lay a man who saw her success as a threat to his fragile ego. Their relationship had crumbled when she refused to step back from her company to play the role of the dutiful wife he envisioned. The wedding was set for the following weekend at the prestigious Vanderbilt Mansion in Hyde Park, New York. 200 of the city's elite would gather to witness what society pages were already calling the wedding of the century. Victoria had initially planned to decline, to maintain her dignity and avoid the spectacle. But something about the way the invitation was worded, "Your presence would honor us," felt like a calculated slight, a reminder that she was now on the outside looking in. As she contemplated her options, Victoria's phone buzzed with messages from concerned friends. Some urged her to skip the wedding entirely, while others suggested she attend with a date who would make Marcus jealous. The idea of parading another wealthy businessman as arm candy felt beneath her, a game she had no interest in playing. She needed something different, something that would make a statement without stooping to Marcus's level of pettiness. The next morning, Victoria found herself walking through Central Park, seeking clarity in the crisp autumn air. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of amber and crimson, creating a canopy of natural beauty that reminded her why she loved this city. As she rounded the corner near Bethesda Fountain, she heard something that made her stop in her tracks. Music floated through the air, not the typical street performance she was accustomed to, but something extraordinary. A violin sang with such passion and technical precision that it seemed to channel the very soul of the musician. Victoria followed the sound, drawn by an inexplicable pull she couldn't ignore. There, beside the fountain, stood a man in his early 30s playing a violin that had clearly seen better days. His clothes were worn but clean: dark jeans, a faded blue shirt, and a leather jacket that spoke of countless hours spent outdoors. His dark hair fell slightly over his eyes as he concentrated on his music, lost in a world where only the notes mattered. The violin case at his feet contained a modest collection of bills and coins, evidence of his talent's ability to move strangers to generosity. Victoria watched, mesmerized, as the man transitioned from a haunting classical piece to a modern arrangement that seemed to tell a story of heartbreak and redemption. Other passersby had stopped to listen, their faces reflecting the same wonder she felt. This wasn't just street performance. This was artistry of the highest caliber. As the final notes faded, the small crowd erupted in applause. Victoria found herself clapping along, genuinely moved by what she had witnessed. The musician looked up, catching her eye for just a moment, and she saw something there that struck her immediately: intelligence, depth, and a confidence that Didn't need expensive clothes or fancy degrees to validate itself. An idea began to form in Victoria's mind. Wild and impulsive in a way that went against every calculated decision she had made in her business life. She approached the musician as the crowd dispersed, her heart racing with the audacity of what she was about to propose. The man was packing his violin with careful precision, treating the instrument with the reverence of someone who understood its value beyond monetary worth. Up close, Victoria could see the calloused fingertips that spoke of countless hours of practice, the subtle lines around his eyes that suggested he had lived through experiences that went far beyond his years. Victoria introduced herself simply, without the titles and credentials that usually preceded her name. She learned that his name was Daniel Rivers, and that he had been playing violin since childhood. What she didn't expect was the way he looked at her, not with the calculating interest she was used to from men who saw her wealth as an opportunity, but with genuine curiosity about the person behind the expensive clothes and carefully styled appearance. As they talked, Victoria found herself sharing more than she had intended. She spoke about her company, her recent breakup, and the complicated relationship she had with the society that had embraced her success, while never quite accepting her as one of their own. Daniel listened without judgment, offering insights that revealed a wisdom gained through experience rather than education. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on music, art, and the strange ways life could surprise you when you least expected it. Victoria discovered that Daniel had once been a professional musician, performing with prestigious orchestras before a series of personal tragedies had derailed his career. He had spent the last 2 years rebuilding his life, finding peace in the simple act of sharing his music with whoever would listen. As the afternoon wore on, Victoria found herself reluctant to leave. There was something about Daniel's presence that made her feel more like herself than she had in years. He didn't try to impress her or change himself to fit her world. He simply existed as he was, authentic and uncompromising. It was then that Victoria made her proposal. She explained about the wedding, about Marcus, and about her desire to attend with someone who would represent everything her ex-fiancé was not. She offered to pay Daniel handsomely for his time, to buy him appropriate attire, and to brief him on the social dynamics he would encounter. Daniel's initial reaction was one of skepticism. He had no interest in playing dress-up or participating in the games of the wealthy. But as Victoria explained her motivations, not revenge, but a desire to show Marcus that there was more to life than the narrow world he inhabited, Daniel began to understand the deeper meaning of her request. Proposal hung in the air between them, representing a leap of faith for both. Victoria was asking the complete stranger to step into her world and help her navigate one of the most emotionally challenging events of her life. Daniel was being asked to temporarily abandon his principles of authenticity to help a woman he had just met make a statement he didn't fully understand. As the sun began to set over Central Park, casting long shadows across the fountain, both Victoria and Daniel realized that this chance encounter had already changed something fundamental in both their lives. The wedding was still a week away, but the real transformation had already begun. The Vanderbilt mansion stood like a testament to America's Gilded Age, its limestone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun as guests arrived for what society columnists were already calling the event of the season. Victoria sat in the back of her Mercedes, watching the parade of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos make their way up the mansion's grand staircase. Her own appearance was flawless, a midnight blue silk gown that had cost more than most people's monthly salary, paired with jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother. Beside her, Daniel adjusted his bow tie with the careful attention of someone unaccustomed to formal wear. The tuxedo Victoria had selected fit him perfectly, transforming his rugged appearance into something that would allow him to blend seamlessly with the other guests. Yet something in his posture suggested he wore the expensive clothes like armor, protection against a world that felt foreign and potentially hostile. During the week leading up to the wedding, Victoria and Daniel had met several times. What had begun as practical preparation, teaching him about the guests he would meet, the social protocols he would need to navigate, the stories they would need to tell about how they met, had evolved into something deeper. Victoria found herself looking forward to their meetings, drawn to Daniel's honest perspective on her world and his complete lack of interest in her wealth or status. For his part, Daniel had been surprised by the complexity of the woman who had approached him. At the fountain, beneath Victoria's polished exterior, lay someone who had fought for everything she had achieved, who had built her success despite the obstacles placed in her path by those who believed her gender and background disqualified her from their exclusive circles. Her invitation to the wedding, he had come to understand, was less about making her ex-fiancé jealous and more about proving to herself that she could face her past without being diminished by it. As they entered the mansion, Victoria felt the familiar weight of social performance settle on her shoulders. Conversations paused as heads turned to assess her appearance and speculate about her companion. She had attended countless events like this, but tonight felt different. Having Daniel beside her created a buffer against the superficial interactions that typically defined these gatherings. The mansion's great hall had been transformed into a wedding paradise. Thousands of white roses cascaded from crystal chandeliers, while golden accents caught the light from dozens of candles. The guest list read like a who's who of American high society politicians, CEOs, celebrities, and old money families whose names graced museum wings and university buildings. Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing Daniel as a classical musician and carefully deflecting questions about their relationship. She watched him navigate conversations with surprising grace, his genuine interest in others creating connections that went beyond the usual social pleasantries. Several guests commented on his unusual perspective, his ability to discuss music and art with a depth that revealed true passion rather than mere cultural education. The ceremony itself was a masterpiece of orchestrated perfection. Marcus stood at the altar in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly earnings, his smile never wavering as he played the role of the devoted groom. Sophia, his bride, was radiant in a gown that had undoubtedly been featured in multiple fashion magazines. Everything was designed to project an image of fairy tale romance, the kind of love story that society magazines would celebrate for months to come. Victoria watched the proceedings with a mixture of detachment and curiosity. She had once imagined herself in Sophia's place, walking down that same aisle toward a future that now seemed like someone else's dream. The pain she had expected to feel was notably absent, replaced by something approaching pity for the performance. She was witnessing as the couple exchanged vows. Victoria noticed Daniel's expression. He was watching the ceremony with the same intensity he brought to his music, as if he were analyzing the emotional authenticity of what he was witnessing. When he caught her eye, his slight shake of the head conveyed more than words could have. Saw through the elaborate production to the emptiness at its core. The reception that followed was a study in a study in conspicuous consumption. The ballroom had been transformed into a garden paradise, with live butterflies released to flutter among the guests and a menu crafted by celebrity chefs. A 12-piece orchestra provided background music while guests mingled and gossiped about everything from stock prices to political scandals. Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying the evening, largely due to Daniel's presence. He approached each interaction with curiosity rather than judgment, asking questions that revealed the humanity behind the social masks. She watched him engage with everyone from elderly philanthropists to young socialites, finding common ground with each person he met. As the evening progressed, several guests approached Victoria to compliment her on her choice of companion. Daniel's authenticity stood out in sharp contrast to the calculated charm that characterized most of the men in attendance. He didn't try to impress or network, he simply existed as himself, and that genuine quality drew people to him like a magnet. Moment that would change everything came when the traditional entertainment began. The orchestra had been playing pleasant background music throughout dinner, but now it was time for the special performances that would mark the couple's first dance and the formal beginning of the celebration. Marcus had arranged for a surprise performance by a renowned tenor from the Metropolitan Opera, a gesture designed to demonstrate his sophisticated taste and substantial wealth. The performance was technically perfect, but emotionally hollow, a display of vocal prowess that impressed without moving the audience. As the applause died down, Marcus took the microphone to thank his guests and share his joy about beginning this new chapter of his life. His speech was polished and rehearsed, hitting all the expected notes about love, commitment, and the support of family and friends. But as he spoke, Victoria noticed something that others seemed to miss: a slight tremor in his voice, a moment of uncertainty that suggested not everything was as perfect as it appeared. It was then that Daniel did something completely unexpected. He stood up from their table and made his way to the front of the room, his movement creating a ripple of curiosity among the guests. Victoria watched in amazement as he approached the orchestra and had a brief conversation with the conductor, who nodded and stepped aside. What happened next would be talked about in society circles for years to come. Daniel picked up a violin from the orchestra's collection and began to play. But this wasn't the background music that had accompanied dinner. This was something entirely different. The melody that emerged was haunting and beautiful, a piece that seemed to speak directly to the soul of everyone in the room. As Daniel played, the ballroom fell completely silent. The conversation stopped, the clinking of glasses ceased, and even the waitstaff paused in their duties to listen. The music he created was unlike anything these sophisticated guests had ever heard: raw, emotional, and absolutely authentic, in a way that highlighted the artificiality of everything else about the evening. But it was what Daniel did next that truly shocked everyone. As the melody reached its crescendo, he began to speak, his voice carrying clearly through the room without amplification. He told a story, not the prepared speech that was expected at such events, but something that came from the deepest part of his experience. He spoke about love and loss, about the difference between performance and authenticity, about what it meant to truly know and be known by another person. As he talked, his words were accompanied by violin phrases that seemed to underscore and amplify his meaning. The combination was mesmerizing, creating a moment of genuine emotional connection in a room that had been carefully designed to avoid such vulnerability. Victoria listened in amazement as Daniel revealed something she had never expected. He wasn't just a talented street musician who had fallen on hard times. He was David Rivers, a world-renowned violinist who had walked away from a successful career after a personal tragedy had shown him the emptiness of performing for acclaim rather than connection. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Several guests recognized the name. David Rivers had been featured on magazine covers, had performed with the world's most prestigious orchestras, had been hailed as one of the most promising classical musicians of his generation. His sudden disappearance from the music world 3 years earlier had been the subject of considerable speculation. As Daniel David continued his performance, he revealed the story behind his disappearance. He had been engaged to a fellow musician, a violinist named Sarah, who had shared his passion for music and his dreams of artistic achievement. They had been planning a wedding, building a life together, when a drunk driver had taken her life just weeks before their ceremony.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.